So, how in the world do military planners even try to predict the next great war? It's got to be one of the most high stakes questions on the planet. And the answers? Well, they're this fascinating mix of hard data, super intense simulations, and get this, even historical fiction. Let's dig into how they do it. Right. Let's just put the core problem right out there. How do you actually predict the next world war? I mean, it sounds kind of impossible, right? And honestly, in a lot of ways, it is. History is just littered with the ghosts of failed predictions. This quote from the Rand Corporation just hits the nail on the head. Even the most powerful, most sophisticated militaries have consistently failed to see their next big conflict coming. It's this constant, humbling reminder that the future of war is just profoundly, deeply unknowable. Okay, so to really get why this is so hard today, we've got to look back at how we've gotten it wrong before. Because there's this huge mistake that strategists keep making, and it's often called fighting the last war. And you can see this pattern pop up again and again throughout history. In 1914, everybody thought it would be a quick war of movement, over by Christmas. Instead, years of brutal trench warfare. Fast forward a couple of decades, France prepares for another World War I, digging in, and gets totally outmaneuvered by Germany's Blitzkrieg. Then in the 60s, the US is all geared up for a massive tank battle in Europe, but finds itself fighting a totally different kind of war in the jungles of Vietnam. Time after time, the next war is just never the one you were expecting. So, how does this whole history of getting it wrong apply to us right now? Well, let's take a look at the major forces that are shaping the modern global chessboard. And let me tell you, the picture today is incredibly complex. This really breaks down the key challenges. First up, we're seeing the return of what they call great power competition. Basically, big strategic rivalries with countries like China and Russia. At the same time, the US military's traditional advantages, both in numbers and tech, are shrinking. And then there's this whole world of gray zone warfare. We're talking cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, proxy fights, all designed to stay just below the line of an actual declared war. You throw in the spread of advanced tech like anti-satellite weapons, and, well, you've got a recipe for extreme unpredictability. So planners will look at maps like this, right? Trying to visualize all these moving pieces, all these potential flashpoints. But as you can see, the game is global now. It's not about one single front line anymore. It's this incredibly complicated worldwide web of interconnected tensions. So how do you even begin to get a handle on a problem this complicated? Well, one of the most powerful tools they have is something called wargaming. So let's look at a very specific and, frankly, a pretty chilling example. So in 2022, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, you'll hear them called CSIS, did exactly that. They built this incredibly detailed simulation of one of the world's most dangerous flashpoints, a full-scale Chinese invasion of Taiwan. And they set it in the near future, the year 2026. Now, this wasn't just a one-and-done kind of thing. To make sure their results were solid, they played out the entire war 24 separate times. They tweaked the variables, they tried different strategies, all to see what might happen under a whole range of different conditions. And what they found was absolutely staggering. In most of the simulations, the United States lost 2 of its super carriers. I mean, the very symbol of American naval power. Sunk. Gone. And the human cost? Just devastating. The simulation projected that in just the first 3 weeks of fighting, there would be over 10,000 casualties across all sides. But what about the invading force? Well, the losses there were just catastrophic. The simulation showed that China's amphibious fleet, all the ships you need to actually land troops on the beaches, was almost completely wiped out. 90% of it destroyed. So let's put this all together. In the simulation, China's invasion ultimately fails. But, and this is a huge but, it's a victory at a devastating cost. The US and its allies pay an absolutely immense price. Losses like these would be the worst naval disaster for the United States since the Second World War. It's just a brutal, brutal vision of what a modern great power war could look like. But here's the thing about war games. They aren't just about predicting disaster. They're about finding ways to avoid it. And this simulation pointed to a very specific strategy that could deter, or if needed, defeat an invasion. They called it the porcupine strategy, and the name is perfect, right? The idea is simple, but really powerful. Make Taiwan so bristling with defensive weapons, so prickly, that the cost of an invasion becomes unthinkably high for any attacker. It's all about creating deterrence through a powerful defense. Now, for this strategy to work, the simulation laid out 4 absolutely critical conditions. No wiggle room. First, Taiwan itself has to fight and resist. Second, the US can't wait. It has to jump in with its own forces immediately. Third, being able to use US bases in Japan for combat missions is essential. And fourth, the Allies need to have massive stockpiles of long-range anti-ship missiles to grind down the invading fleet. The simulation showed that if any one of these conditions isn't met, the whole outcome changes, dramatically for the worse. But this kind of strategic forecasting isn't just limited to supercomputers and complex simulations. In fact, one of the most influential war games of the entire Cold War was actually a novel. Back in 1978, a British general named Sir John Hackett did something amazing. He wrote a book called The Third World War. And he wrote it as if it were a history book, looking back from the future, detailing this huge hypothetical war between NATO and the Soviet Union. For a whole generation of soldiers and strategists, this book was an incredibly powerful way to imagine the unimaginable. And comparing these two scenarios, Hackett's fictional war and the modern CSIS wargame, it really shows you how much our thinking about the next war has shifted. Hackett's war was this massive land battle in Central Europe. Tanks, armies, the works. The key was whether NATO could hold the line with conventional forces. But the CSIS war? It's a naval and air conflict in the Pacific. And the decisive factors are long-range precision missiles and the political will to use them from day one. The geography is different, the technology is different, but that fundamental challenge of thinking ahead and trying to maintain deterrence, that hasn't changed at all. Which brings us right back to where we started. War games, forecasts, even works of fiction, they're all essential tools, and they're all built on what we think we know. They help us prepare for a really dangerous and uncertain future. But as history has shown us over and over again, the real question is always this. What's the one thing we don't know? What's the one unpredictable turn, the one crucial factor we haven't accounted for that changes everything? That's the enduring and, the unsettling mystery of the next world war.